Welcome to the Two Real podcast. It's myself, Colin, and my friend Mick, where it's just two guys, two Irish guys, just having a conversation about the current state of Ireland and the world and different topics, which include the likes of politics, the economy, migration, housing, the views of the elderly, the views of the youth for this country, where what's it looking like. So this is my friend Mick, who I met actually on the hike. We kind of had the similar views, and we kind of struck a friendship then, and we just got meeting up and talking more, which I think is important for everybody. And I don't know how he still listens to me.
Look, we do our best. But yeah, we met on the hiking trip, and it's like anything. You don't meet too many people with have like minds, such as ourselves in Ireland today, huh?
Yeah, I'd agree with that, especially if you're looking at was it the end of 2020 or no, it was 2021 when we went on the hike. And
Yeah.
if I'm being honest, it's kind of when you kind of wake up from what's going on in the world and you realize everyone else is not, and then you meet somebody who is. It's kind of there's like a draw to that person and people who think like-minded, because it can be isolating from what you're used to what, well, it was for me anyway. I'm sure.
Yeah, you're always drawn to meet the others when you get out and about, and yeah, sure. Look at you just hit it off and you run with it. But it's been a journey though.
It has.
With everything that's gone on over the last few years, and yeah, we have to stick together.
Yeah,
that's the key to it all.
It is, and I think the reason why we started this podcast is basically because I think there's people who are questioning things more, and you kind of have to be, because things are just getting so wild out there that you'd have to be questioning something now at this stage. And I think rather than being branded a conspiracy theorist or something lazy like that, people are now questioning how did these people know certain things.
Yeah, well, my perspective would be I think the main real reason that, say, certain people would accuse others of being conspiracy theorists is that they're basically uncomfortable about what's going on.
Yeah.
And the accusation of being a conspiracy theorist is really just a defense mechanism on their part. And it is heady stuff, to be fair about it. And there's a lot of people that just, they're not able for it. Like, you imagine if you had, say, a big mortgage and it's taken 60% of your wages.
Yeah.
Or even massive rent. You didn't even get a chance to buy your house yet. You've maybe a couple of kids to provide for, and you have another 20 or 30 years of this ahead of you. How are you going to have any space in your head for economic depressions, Iran wars, oil spiraling out of control, the WEF and their publications and what they have planned for the future? How you nearly can't blame somebody in a way when they're in that perspective. It's understandable now. I know it doesn't help the situation, and it would be much better if they at least had some curiosity. But it's a very high pressure situation for a lot of people to be in, but the thing is, the defense mechanism doesn't work as a strategy. What's going to happen is still going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
So you still have to look at it. You still have to develop curiosity, and you still have to adapt and position yourself as best you can. That'll be my perspective on it. So,
are you seeing a change, like even in just from, obviously, like, this has been going on for a long time, and obviously even longer than when COVID happened. Obviously it's been going on for such a long period of time. But just if we just go from the COVID period, are you seeing a massive change in the last, I would say, couple of months or even weeks with, we'll just use the fuel protests as an example. Are you seeing a kind of more, people are more open, say, for instance, to a conversation about these things, or do you still find that there's that massive blockade?
In my travels anyway, as far as I can see, people don't have the same confidence in the official narrative as they would have 5 years ago. Like 5 years ago, if you weren't on board with COVID and listening to the experts and following the leaders, no matter how contradictory what they were saying, there was obviously something wrong with you. And whoever was saying that, whoever was taking that position, could be very confident in that position. And there was almost a smugness. There was, you can really call it a militancy in a way, in people when they would dismiss you out of hand. Oh no, you don't know what you're talking about, or anything like that. And even when you say to them, okay, well, Dr. Robert Malone, he invented the RNA platform for the vaccine.
Yeah.
Is he a conspiracy theorist against his own invention?
Yeah.
Kerry Mullis, is he a conspiracy theorist against his own PCR test when he said that you shouldn't be testing it over a certain amount of cycles? I think he said 35 or something like that. So it's all just dismissal of information that's inconvenient and uncomfortable. And 5 years ago, people could be very, very confident in that position, whereas now I find that the confidence has really been sapped out of people. That's what I find now, that they're not, I can't go so far as to say that they're awake and curious and interested in what's going on in the world. I can't say that, but they're not as confident in their dismissal and their rejection of what you're saying. Even if they don't like to hear it, even if they don't necessarily agree, there's at least, we've kind of moved from malice to indifference. That's the way I put it now. Like 5 years ago, a lot of people were quite malicious in how they rejected any possibility that there was any doubts about the official narrative. Whereas now that maliciousness is gone, but indifference has crept in, and they're just, it's almost as if they're pretending, no, it's not real now.
Well, I have to put my hand up. I know we're on audio here, but I have to put my hand up and say, like, when COVID kicked off, I have to be honest, I never lie about these things, but I did fall for it for 6 months of it, I think it was, or whatever. I did fall for it. And
that's how anybody learns.
Yeah, and then it was when I watched a video, or I was conscious that something wasn't right, but I was still ignoring it because,
trust probably.
Yeah, just, I don't know, it was weird. It was kind of, but then I watched a video that someone sent me, and it was unbelievable. But I was at one stage, it's a weird one, because people always say, when did you wake up? And when I looked at that video, I remember I paused it after about 3 minutes, and in my mind it was kind of like, do I continue? Do I continue?
I won't be coming back from this.
Yeah, do I continue, or do I press, just say, I won't look at that stuff,
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is. I think it's kind of something within you. It just, because people always say, who woke you up? I think no matter what, you wake yourself up. Because people can give you information and they can say, well, that person sent me that video or whatever it is, but you still have to make that choice. Okay, am I going to really look at this?
Yeah, connect with reality or dismiss it type
exactly
thing. Yeah.
And I pressed play.
Yeah.
And I continued on, and then, but that's a long story.
The rest is history, as to say.
But are we coming to that stage now where, just using as 5 years on, are we coming to the stage where we can, if you do send information to somebody, now I don't anymore, I just don't.
I still wouldn't randomly send information to what we call a normie member of family or that, because they have their own crosses to carry.
Yeah.
Like I know a lot of people where I wouldn't burden them with any more. Even though, like I said, and I still stand by it, denial and, for want of a better word, ignorance isn't a strategy to deal with the future. The future is going to arrive one way or the other. Like, there's a lot of this new agey thing after moving in now where people say, I'm not going to give that any attention, it won't manifest. Well, when children are born with terminal diseases, how much attention do they give to that?
Yeah.
And yet it manifests anyway. Unfortunately, we live in a universe that's made of light and dark, and all can and will happen, and there's really cause and effect. cause and effect is at the center of everything, and what's going to happen is going to happen, and the only question is, how are you going to deal with it? And that's where there is a bit of fluidity. Like, I don't mean to be completely dismissive of the new age perspective. Your own subjective perception of what's happening will have a massive bearing on your causality, on what you do and how you deal with what's happening. So I suppose you kind of entertain the manifestation crowd to a degree that way. But look, another element of reality that seems to be kind of hardwired is that it's cyclical. Everything goes in cycles into seasons, cycles of life, and so on and so forth. The big wheel of time turns, and eventually you will have to deal with reality.
Yeah, I think we're in that period of turn. Like, I've kind of noticed that we've had incidents where people are like, "Oh, this is the turning point," and it's, you raise your spirits up because hope is a good thing, as the Shawshank Redemption said before.
Yeah. Yeah.
Hope is a good thing, and I understand a lot of people put a lot of energy into, say, for example, the fuel protests like a couple of weeks ago. And now they're disheartened because it has literally hit a flat line since. So a lot of people put their energy into, oh, this is going to wake up the country.
Yeah.
Now, I don't go at people who do that, as in, like, I can understand why someone grasps onto something like that, because in Ireland especially, like, there's no movement, there's nothing like that, and the alt scene is just fighting amongst each other all the time. And then if anyone has, maybe you could be 99 things you could agree with somebody in the alt scene, or somebody who's technically awake, and then you might have one different thing or belief system to that person, and they will literally dismiss you or fight with you until they listen. I think we got to move away from that, because if I was waking up again, it's not attractive to, like, there's no help there, if I'm being honest with you. If you're a person who's waking up to certain things at the moment, it's a minefield for somebody now, because if someone say, oh, where do I go? At least in America, a lot of people might agree with it in certain things, but you have your MAGA. In America, you've got maybe reform or whatever it is. You have a certain thing that you can look at. You have GBS News. You have something to look at. Like, I don't watch mainstream, but I imagine some people watch OAN, or the odd time you might get a bit of truth in Fox or something like that, Fox News. In Ireland, there's literally nothing. So,
yeah, it's very much an echo chamber.
And then it's an echo chamber, and then you have the alt scene fighting amongst each other. And that is not good. Whereas I think we're never all going to agree with everything, and that's a good thing. I think that's a really good thing. I don't want to be around someone who agrees with me all the time, or I believe everything they believe in. I think it's good to talk things out, but not get annoyed at somebody or say, I'm not listening to them because they don't believe everything I say. And I've met people like that, and it's not good. And we need to get more people on our side who are waking up to things and say, look, we don't know everything, but there are certain things that are very obvious here.
Yeah. The trend that I've observed, say, for the last 10 years, because I've been following kind of, I won't say oddball stuff, but non-normie things, everything from the mysteries of the pyramids to human psychology to oddities going on in current affairs for a while now. And one theme, if you like, or trend that's way different now than 10 years ago is the speed and the repetitiveness with which things are coming out. As in, 10 years ago, like, there'd be one piece of mind-blowing information coming out once every 2 weeks. And then a couple of years later, then it was once every week. And then once every few days. And now, you basically can't even keep up with it.
Yeah.
It's coming out that quick. So,
do you think it's designed that way? Do you think it's designed to
that's a
make
good question, actually.
Do you think it's maybe like you had 9/11 or whatever it is back in the day, right?
Yeah.
And you had, say...
back that far. Back then, like, there was a famous video back then. It was called Loose Change, it was called. And that was the big truth platform, or truth presentation, if you like, at that time. But that's the way it was back then. You get one InfoWars video, maybe professionally designed. You get the Loose Change video that will come out once every few years.
Yeah.
And then, again, that just makes the trajectory that I'm talking about even more clear, that there's a quickening of information coming out now. And now it's at the point, like I said, where you you basically can't keep up with it.
Yeah.
And it just brings me back around to where, you know, like some guy who has a lot of responsibilities, I nearly can't blame him for not being able to keep up with it or not being able to have an opinion of it. The only thing that gets me a little bit, I have to say, is incuriosity, where, say, for example, during COVID, you might bring to attention Sweden, for example, to somebody, and like there you have a full entire country that's not having lockdowns, they didn't even have mask mandates or anything like that, and their infection rates were no different significantly than anywhere else. In fact, they were performing better than a lot of hard lockdown countries. And no, it'd be dismissed out of hand. Now, that's the type of thing, that kind of determined ignorance is what I don't like. At that point, I have to call out a bad character trait in and of itself. But look, it's like that thing, the fifth generation warfare.
Yeah.
Like, as far as I'm concerned, this is the new world that we're in now. We don't fight wars with, you know, battalions and regiments and
No, it's different.
uniform fighting anymore. Now it's psychological warfare, it's information warfare, and it's coming at you live every day of the week.
And would you believe when you say that, I've always held this thought. I think there's people who, say, for instance, went to World War II and things like that, when they had wars, that they're in a physical battle and there's bullets, and horrendous, would be scary for anyone to be in and things like that. Whereas I actually feel some of them, and this might sound, a lot of people might agree with this, but I've always felt people in them wars would still choose that war than the war we're in at the moment, because I think ours is so psychological that we're getting, like, I feel we have our politicians smirking and laughing. We have
well, it is all
we have the
psychological,
media. We have whereas you have to keep your calmness through all of that mocking.
Well, that's demoralization.
Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is, I think some people would still probably choose World War II, even as mad as that sounds, because this has been going on for, say, increased since COVID.
Well, it always amazes me when, in this day and age, when lads volunteer to fight for the likes of Ukraine at the moment and all that. Like, what is, if you have ancestral ties to that country, then I'd understand it. But it always amazes me what motivates somebody to say join as a volunteer in the war in Ukraine right now, when they know that, well, maybe they don't know, maybe that's the other thing, maybe they don't know, but they'll find out they're going under the biggest artillery force on planet Earth. And so there's a lot of truth in what you're saying. It sounds kind of outrageous when you think, oh yeah, some guys would probably prefer the old way of doing things, to be in a trench where you can at least see your enemy. There would be a weird paradoxical, almost like a lessening of anxiety there, in the sense that you can actually see your enemy for once.
Yeah.
And if you want to take a defensive position, you can actually physically build it. Whereas this psychological thing going on, it's just ubiquitous, it's everywhere, and a lot of people, unfortunately, can only deal with it through, for want of a better term, burying their heads in the sand.
Yeah.
You know, kicking the can down the road. And like I said, while that is understandable, one day you're going to run out of road to kick the can down, and you're going to have no road and a lot of cans, and a lot of rubbish to clean up, and that, unfortunately, is the double bind that the average person is in.
Yeah.
When it comes to that.
And I think there's a lot of aspects to this, because if you look at it, you go through different stages of your race. So you're angry and the system, or you're angry at what's going on. Then you get angry because people aren't waking up to it like you have. Then you get, and they're not seeing it. You're trying to show them, they don't want to know about it. So you just get angry, or you get things like that. You go through different stages. And then you have to obviously work on yourself, work on within, and become a better person, and armor yourself through that way. I think is really important, because like what we said, this isn't a physical war where there's bullets, but it's a fifth generation war where it is coming from the media. It's coming from even people you love. It's actually coming from. They will defend this system and the people who are causing all of this, and the replacement of the Irish people with migration. Like, they've defended that, and they will turn on you and call you all the spell words, whether it be racist or conspiracy theorists or far right, all these different things, they have more soldiers in this war, fifth generation warfare. And the worst thing is they're the ones we're fighting to try and help to make it easier for our country or countries around the world to get their countries back and try and take away from this system. Now it is proving very difficult, but we can't give up completely, because I do feel that there is, with everything that's going on in the last 6 years, some are waking at different stages. Now some will never wake. You have to accept that, and you literally just have to move on. Don't be always be nice to people. That's the way I look at it. If I meet people, if I go to the gym or whatever it may be, I'm always nice to people. It's just they don't want to wake up, and they're not. Are they able? I don't know.
Yeah, well, that would be related to, I suppose you could say, their value system or their character. The human mind has a system of priorities as what's most important to it. It's basically subconscious belief systems. And unfortunately, the human mind also generalizes. So therefore, when an individual develops their own system of priorities, things that are most important to them, they have a tendency to generalize that across the rest of the population. Hence the reason why a lot of people seen, for example, in the most recent significant example of it, the fuel protests. And a lot of people of our disposition would have gotten very enthusiastic about that, because they would have seen a lot of their values in that. Where, okay, now we're going to fight for Ireland, now we're going to get the elite, we're going to get them under control, and this, that and the other. A lot of people thinking that the government was going to be toppled and all that type of thing. But unfortunately, what motivates a good chunk of the farmers to go up to the likes of those protests is what's of most importance to them and their values, which is just trying to keep their heads above water in their farms, in their business. So just without elaborating too much on that, the point is that you can have, basically, outcomes are driven by behaviours, obviously, and behaviours are driven by values. So the end result is you have people who see an event such as the fuel protests, they project their values onto that. They think that's going to lead to their preferred outcome, the toppling of the government, when all that's really motivating a lot of that is just to have a reduction in fuel costs.
Yeah.
That's really all it comes down to. Not for everyone, of course, but for a lot of people, what generally motivated that was just those mundane, let's call them, priorities.
Yeah.
That people would have had. And for that reason, a lot of names would have developed what we call false hope in the protest. They thought it was going to lead somewhere that it was never going to lead to.
And I have to say it, because some people said, oh, it's a psyop, this kind of stuff, it's a psyop. To be honest with you, I took things from this protest that I think have worked quite well, because in Ireland we can go through it's been times where it's been static for like 2 years of nothing, and it's just continuation of demoralization for the public and all that kind of stuff. But what I would take out of the fuel protests is there's definitely been a trust broken between the Garda and the average citizen.
Yeah, that's very true.
And I think that's really important. And I think as well as that, what we saw was, just for an example, I don't even like saying their names because they're just puppets, but someone like Micheál Martin, the contempt he came out and spoke to people and to the average person and to and Helen McEntee and these creatures that come out and speak the way they do, I think it showed a real sign of darkness, and that people, the average person, had not seen. Because we were kind of locked into and tuned into the way they were speaking to us during COVID, and the way they were speaking to us through the migration and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of the average person kind of sided with them because they were just, that was the stage they're at. Whereas this, I think, opened the door to, geez,
something's not quite right.
Something is not quite right here.
Mm.
These politicians are kind of looking down and speaking to us nasty. And this is my average farmer who I know up the road.
Yeah.
Who's a good guy.
Yeah.
And just, these fuel costs or whatever is so
Yeah.
high. And then with the Guard, I think I've seen 1 or 2 videos of Gardaí spraying, into
Pepper spray.
pepper spray into the kid and things.
Should have pulled one fella from his tractor and he wasn't even going to the protest.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was going to do a job and they just pulled him out with a fucking tractor.
Yeah. No, what I will say is, since that fuel protest, there's not a thing being said about it. Now, that actually made...
But that's because it led to the outcome that was really wanted.
This is what I'm trying to say.
A concession with regards to fuel prices.
Yeah.
The value mightn't have been perfectly fulfilled, but it was overall fulfilled. Good enough type thing. Let's pack it up and go home for the time being. So, yeah, values really are at the centre of a lot of what's going on. And I suppose you could elaborate on that a little bit more by returning to the demoralisation we mentioned earlier on.
Yeah.
Where most famously there was that guy who defected from the Soviet Union back in the day. Now, I can't remember his second name, and even if I could, I probably couldn't pronounce it anyway, but Yuri was his first name. And he outlined the 5 steps that what would have been called at the time, the communists used to subvert and undermine and psychologically and institutionally invade a country. And step number 1, demoralisation.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is, so far as I can tell anyway, it's my understanding that demoralisation reduces your values in general and reduces your character, which means even what values you do have can't be expressed to any great degree. The upshot of that is you'll be much less likely to defend your values. You can't defend values you don't have. Or you can't defend values that you may have but are still expressed through far more superficial means. I suppose a loose analogy would be demoralisation reduces values, which in turn reduces, if you like, the spiritual immune system that a population would have against subversion and psychological manipulation, all that type of. And it doesn't take that much. Like if you go into, I'd imagine, that I'm only using this hypothetically, into a travelling community and tell them that they're not only a shower of racists and blah blah blah, they won't accept that.
No.
They'll tell you on your bike, who do you think you are coming in here talking to us like that? That's because they're not demoralised.
Yes.
They still value who they are.
100%.
And it's all about your internal valuation, your subjective value, not an objective value, subjective value internally. So that's the values thing. So in effect, demoralisation is like an immune suppressant to a population, and it basically enables the very psychological warfare, if you want to use that term, and psychological methods that we observe in the world today. Hence the reason why a lot of senior politicians, such as Micheál Martin and others, can be seen looking unduly confident than they otherwise should be, given the position that the country's in. They have an almost smug level of confidence, which is very unusual for a country that has, tens of thousands of homeless and a generation not believing to have any future. I believe the reason is that they know that people are demoralised and they know that they're not going to do much. And even if they do, they're not going to stay the course.
Yeah, I think they actually test the waters to see where the public are at.
But they're testing the whole thing.
100%. I think everything's a test from the higher... I believe a lot of all these politicians are just literally puppets, and the hierarchy are testing the waters, and they obviously use these just to test. And I feel at times they're trying to antagonise, and
that'll be part of demoralisation as well.
Yeah.
It's a bit like if you, and I know I don't like using this analogy, but it's apt at the same time. If you beat an animal that's strong and that has high morale, it'll fight back. Whereas if you beat an animal that's broken, it won't do anything.
Yeah. And
they call that learned helplessness. And the very famous psychologist back in the day, back in the 70s, if I remember right, called Martin Seligman, he actually discovered this, where they ran tests, because back then, just to clarify, the accepted model of the mind back then was behaviorism, and basically it worked off the presupposition that the mind was a sort of a blank slate, and that you could condition the mind into nearly any habituation, any behavioral pattern that you wanted. And you'd done that primarily through incentive. So if you incentivized somebody or some animal to do something, they would do it. But what learned helplessness proved was that that's not necessarily the case. It does reach a point where incentive doesn't have any effect anymore, and to prove that with tests involving dogs. And it involved a bit of cruelty, unfortunately, but basically dogs were electrocuted in a pen. Now I'm pulling this from memory now. Anybody who had an interest really should look up the videos on YouTube. But basically they electrocuted dogs in a pen. And then the dog was able to jump over a dividing wall in the pen into another one where there was no electric shock. Yeah. So in other words, he learnt, that batch of dogs learnt that the pain was in pen number 1, if you like, and it didn't exist in pen number 2. Then there was another batch of dogs that didn't have that option of jumping out of the pen. They couldn't stop the pain, so eventually they stopped reacting to it. And the dogs just sat down on the ground and they just took it. They're still been shot, still feeling the pain, but no longer actually doing anything about it, because they were that beaten down that it just became habituated to them. And the real, where this goes from behaviorism into, well, let's just say further implications, is that even when the electric shock was removed, and even when the wall separating the 2 pens was lowered so that the dog could jump out if he wanted, he still wouldn't do it. He learnt to be helpless. It became a pattern. And that's what happens with that, in my opinion anyway. That's demoralization.
100%. And they know that. The elite, I even hate calling them that, but just call them that for a moment. The elite, the people who are really in charge, they know all this stuff. They use them methods on the humans, so they will demoralize. Like Ireland has been so demoralized, it's unbelievable. Like I used to remember people, and there was a kick in them. There was a bit of a. Now I tell you who I do see a kick in. If you meet people, like say I've met people from Poland or Moldova. More Eastern European countries, and they're far more awake. They just do not accept what's being thrown, and they have said to me, it's really sad to see the Irish capitulate to all this stuff. And they're really hard-working people who come into Ireland and they're working hard, and I find them great people, and they contribute, and they actually, I've seen these people to get involved, they integrate really well, but they have said to me, it's really sad to see the Irish people bow down to this. We wouldn't allow that. And I think it's really sad, because years ago, there would be that. It was a good example. I think John Waters and a few of them use example of the guy in the pub back in the day, and he'd been after working a hard day on construction, and he'd be there having his few pints, and there'd be a group of guys who come in and say they're on a night out. And they're messing, and they have their phones out or whatever they're doing. They're causing a lot of noise, and the outlet at the bar drinks a little drink, looks over at them, and they're getting louder, but he lets it away. And then out of nowhere, when they go a bit further, he'll eventually sit up and kick the stool and say, "Shut up," or don't do that.
Yeah, past the limits.
Yeah, and it's literally like we've lost that guy at the bar. And now these kids who've come in. That's what we're left with.
Yeah, it's well, you could nearly bring it back to learned helplessness again, because don't forget, learned helplessness isn't specifically about enduring pain and learning to live with. That's not what's really at the core of learned helplessness. Is agency. It's a lack of belief that what you do will make a difference. That's what's at the core of learned helplessness. And if you ask a lot of, say, average Irish people about, might you have any interest in what's going on in the country today, and so on and so forth, a common retort that you'll receive is, sure, what can we do about it?
It's the most common.
What is that? Only an expression of not believing that anything you do will make a difference,
Yeah.
which is learned helplessness, which is demoralisation. Now, it can happen through other means, through more covert means, and I think this will tie into what you're saying about Eastern Europe, where if agency, how much you believe what you do makes a difference, is at the core of how much learned helplessness or learned optimism, the opposite, you develop, then correlation between behaviour and outcome is massively significant in that process as well. So I find it no coincidence that the parts of the places in Europe whose populations were most resistant to the propaganda of, say, the past 5 or 6 years were the locations that have the lowest GDP and that are the most rural. They're the parts of Europe where you basically still have to pre-plan your winter. Not saying how to live in the dark ages or anything like that, but I'm saying...
So you're talking about the likes of Bulgaria.
Yeah,
Serbia,
rural Bulgaria,
yeah.
rural Romania, Moldova, a lot of them places even you mentioned earlier on, where there's still an understanding, if you want an outcome, you have to do something to make that outcome happen. Therefore, there's a high level of agency. And that's why, superficially, Ireland looks like Ireland is a far more wealthy country compared to, say, Romania, for example, or Moldova. But ironically, it will be the Eastern Europeans that have much higher agency than the young Irish come up, because the young Irish, even though they haven't been abused, as in beaten like the poor old dogs in the experiments, at the same time too, they would never had the opportunity to develop any agency in the first place.
Yeah.
It's just the lifestyle, if you like, that's afforded, ironically, by wealth. Wealth sows the seeds of its own decline, in the sense that it robs you of the necessity to develop the traits and capacities which produce the wealth in the first place. And you can see that comparing, say, for example, my grandfather's generation to the modern young generation. They just never had the opportunity, the inclination, the encouragement, the necessity even, to develop those high agency character traits. And it puts them, ironically, into a kind of a learned helplessness by default.
Yeah.
And the end result is they didn't get there by being abused, but the fact that they are there allows a lot of abuse from the government.
Yeah.
And that, in my mind anyway, that's how I formulate the answer to the question as to how it is that wealthy countries that seem to have so many advantages wind up actually enabling and even inviting the despotism that takes them down.
Yeah, and see, 100%. But then you just, for example, Mick, you look at people say, oh, well, why can't we wake up more people or get more people? We're very limited, because when you have a propaganda machine like RT that has been sown into this country, it's literally like mass. Like if you back in the day, like, or even the Late Show, it was like on every television. Like, I think there was only 2 channels. One stage. Then it went to number 2. And obviously, but you think about it. I don't watch mainstream, but if you clicked on the television now, it's nearly like they've made it so bad that people don't watch the news. I find if your first 15 minutes of RT, it would be generally Ukraine, Palestine. It's like people tune in, and it's like the first 12 minutes are not even about your own country, and then they'll bring in some other story. I just find it, when I meet people and I say to them, like, did you see this thing? And they're like, no, I didn't. I don't watch the news anymore. So, and then you'd say to them, okay, are you on, say, X, Twitter? And they'd say, no, I don't. So you're kind of at the stage, like, where did they get any info, or did they even care about any information?
Yeah. You see, again, this is only my perspective and all that. If you haven't learned a high degree of agency and a high degree of, let's say, resilience, it doesn't take all that much of information or events which are incongruent with what you've already learned and what you're already familiar with to generate a lot of discomfort in the mind. And I think that, like, the likes of me and you could look at that information and we'll maybe get a bit pissed off about it or whatever, but it doesn't move into the point where it's causing so much psychological pain that we just have to like tune out of it. That doesn't happen very often with us, if at all, really. In a funny way, we're kind of desensitized to what's going on in the world. Whereas if you were, let's say, the average person who had what we'll call a comfortable upbringing, learning about some of the maliciousness of the world, that's just so incongruent with what they've learned, with what they're familiar with, that the human brain literally just rejects it. And
actually, a prime example of that, in my opinion, was when the Epstein files came out, and horrific. They haven't even gone into the real depth of it, but the other stuff that was going on, and I could go on all day about that stuff. But some of the Epstein stuff that actually came out, obviously the news didn't report it, even though they requested it all the time. But it was leaking out into, say, I'm not on them, but probably Instagram or these things as well. And I was linking out, and I said, I would say to someone, like, I would always, I don't like to use the word test, but I would just see where they're at. I would say to someone, did you see the Epstein stuff? And they go, oh, I heard about it, I didn't look at it. Or I get someone say, like, I just didn't really look into it at all. And like, it's literally said, like, there's cannibalism going on.
Yeah.
And we're at the stage now where, like, people won't even look at it.
Yeah, well, a good example of that, and it ties it in with what I said earlier about values and priorities, is that I remember an article in, it was one of the papers, maybe The Sun, something like that. After the Epstein files were released, the number one headline, the most prominent story that they had about that, published that day, was the fact that Epstein loved his muffins and he insisted on having them made with Kerrygold butter from Ireland.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's the highest priority piece of information, according to, say, Normieland in Ireland. Because they can't handle a lot of the other stuff.
No.
You know what I mean?
And I will not be like, I think we have to understand, like, it is a really, 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 really is a hard thing to wake up to. So, like, I am, even though at times I would have got angry with people for not waking up or seeing the things or not caring, there's an element of me that understands it. Yeah. Now I think we're at a pinnacle time in not only the world but in Ireland as well, history, that if people don't start, I don't know, objecting or whatever it is, or even paying attention to things, like, it's just going to get away from us, or has it already got away from us? Because if you drove, I'll be honest, if you drove through Ireland at the moment, and I drove the other day and to a couple of towns or whatever, you would not know you're in Ireland. Like, I'm not messing, it was nearly 60% were foreign people.
Yeah, it's just globalist communities with no identity, no roots, no tradition, no heritage to that. But that's the irony of globalism, to say, oh, we're going to be multicultural. No, we're going to be no cultural. That's what it results in the end.
Yeah.
In theory, anyway. Now, in reality, all it really causes is balkanization, where people balkanize into their local communities.
Yeah.
Because human nature is what it is. Like I said earlier, all of that, say, political dogma from the mid-20th century that mass immigration was based on, that was based on the model of psychology of behaviorism, where they just presumed that everything was a social construct, more or less, that everything was learned through, say, cultural and incentive systems in your environment. So for that reason, you could cherry pick somebody from a completely different part of the world, and you could plop them down in the middle of London or Dublin or wherever, and because they're now in an environment where they have available to them the same incentives to induce the same behaviours as the native population, well then they should assimilate then.
Yeah.
That was the thinking.
Yeah.
But with now I'm not qualified in evolutionary psychology or anything like that, but I can tell you that evolutionary psychology and evolutionary biology, which are the leading edge study of psychology and biology, have completely rebutted the idea of the blank slate model. Human beings don't come as a blank slate to be programmed.
Mm-hmm.
There are predispositions, we'll call them.
Yeah.
I think the common term is prepared slate.
Yeah.
Now, maybe on another episode, we could have something ready for that to elaborate on that further, and discuss it further, because it is interesting where they find behavioural changes in babies and young children who haven't had a chance to be conditioned and culturated yet. But yet there are behavioural. Basically, what they're saying is genes do guide an awful lot of human behaviour and capacity development. And with that, the implication is dire and obvious that the West has basically penciled itself into a corner with the immigration policies of the last 40 or 50 years. They've blown it, they've got it wrong.
Yeah.
That there's not going to be this great intermingling of all these different, that, genes are real. Now, they're not real to the degree that was taught back in, say, late 19th century, and that would have reached its extreme climax with, say, the likes of the National Socialists and the eugenics movement. Genes don't predestine your life, but they do predisposition behaviour and capacities. And for that reason, there's never going to be an egalitarian utopia. And ironically, it's the policies that they're implementing, such as mass immigration, is the very thing that will make it impossible. Because whatever chance you have with an homogenous population to get some degree of equity amongst the different people who live in a country, this is just going to result in demographic balkanization. And you can see it developing already.
100%. And I've always said this because people they would say to you something around the lines of, oh, you're against all the migration, or you're against the migrants. And I would always say to somebody, don't anger towards the migrants.
No, it's not the migrants.
But if I was in, for example, because it's one of the biggest, one of the most popular countries we get people from, if I was from Somalia, and someone says to me from a place of authority in Ireland, and someone says to me, you can have a house, or you can come here, you can get this much money, you can get this and this and this, and I'm from Somalia, and we all know what's going on there, and I'm from there, and so
you'd be on the plane straight away.
Of course you would be. So I don't blame them. This is where people have to understand.
If Irish people were offered the equivalent of a whole month's pay per week for doing nothing, they'd be on it. There'd be mass exodus out of this country as well. So it's not the carrot; it's who's dangling the carrot.
Exactly.
That's the enemy.
Exactly the wording I'd use as well.
Yeah.
Because I don't know. It's literally like, for instance, people are getting angry at the migrants, and in some cases I understand why, because maybe there's been a sexual assault or a killing, or But it's who has implemented this, and then we also have to recognize these IPAS centers, because this for me is critical. Irish people, are making money off the demise of their own country, and these people who even actually own these IPAS centers, they have grandchildren probably who are Irish, and I'm like, I always say to even a parent now, not that I say much anymore, because I don't know if there's, I always try and talk as much as I can in a nicer frame, because I'd say to someone, if you think it's bad now, and they'd recognise, most people recognise now Ireland is not what it was, and they'd say it's in a delicate situation now with all the migration.
Aaron would agree with that.
And I would say to them, if you think it's bad now, what's it going to be like in 5 years? Because one thing about the people who we're allowing into the country, the breeding is unbelievable. They have bred people. Like, I always use the example of Sweden. Sweden's a prime example for the COVID, for the lockdown. It's a prime example for the migration, who we've got a lot of our migrants from as well. Sweden, a prime example. Europe in general, but I'm using Sweden. There was more bombs in Sweden in 1 year than there was in Afghanistan. Now, that wasn't from Swedish people.
Well, that's what I kind of alluded to. I don't want to speak as if I'm too much of an authority on it. because you do have to be reasonable about it. But that would be an example of how behaviorism just doesn't work. They think they can pick people from Afghanistan and plop them down in Sweden, and that they're going to become a bunch of Scandinavians in a few years' time. It just doesn't work like that.
Same with the other way around. If you picked up a group of Swedish people and brought them to Afghanistan, it's not going to work.
No.
So it's not racist. It's just, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, we have people always, because you have to use these terms because they get thrown at people so much. Sure, we went everywhere around the world. We went everywhere.
Well, that wasn't necessarily a good experience either. Like to say, the Irish went everywhere around the world, as if that's a good thing. It wasn't a good thing that Irish people had to be.
Didn't want to go.
Most of them didn't want to go. Most of them would have been heartbroken. There was a reason why they called the ships coffin ships.
Yeah.
That brought the people away. It wasn't because they were going to die. It was because they were despairing at the fact that they weren't going to see their family again. They didn't want to go.
And in them situations, it's not like you can get a flight back.
No.
And it's not like now,
No. And a lot of the reason why people left was because of corruption in this country.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not an expert on that issue, but I do know that there was a hell of a lot more suffering in Ireland due to the famine, the famine was a hell of a lot worse in Ireland than it should have been, and it could have been. It could have been handled a lot better.
People might call that famine a bit of a genocide.
Yeah.
When you really look into things.
That's right. Yeah.
But let's not go deliberately. Yeah, let's not go to. Let's.
But the point that I'm making is that if all of these do-gooders were so sincere and helping other poor people around the world, why would it not help them to build a prosperous, stable country of their own?
Yeah.
Never ever once do you hear them advocate for a good system of law, a good solid currency, all of the fundamentals that you need for a strong, prosperous economy. It doesn't even have to be overly wealthy as in prosperous. Like an economy doesn't have to have savage high GDP to return a good standard of living or a dignified living. Look at Ireland, it has one of the highest GDPs in the world and has tens of thousands homeless in the streets. So there's no correlation between that. But isn't it funny how all these do-gooders say, we have to help the refugees and so on and so forth, and yet they refuse to entertain the idea of helping them at home, of addressing the underlying cause. Like, what's driving these people to have to flee their countries in the first place?
We have to recognise, because this is a huge thing, because we'll talk about this in another episode, but why are the vast majority of them middle-aged men from a certain background who are coming in?
Yeah. Well,
and in my opinion, with religious views that don't align with our culture. And that's a fact.
Yeah, that's the point I was going to make earlier, but I don't want to elaborate too much because we'll save it for another one. We'll wrap this one up shortly now. But, we kind of still have this idea that the West is super wealthy and the rest of the world is some kind of Dickensian, poverty-stricken realm where people don't have anything.
Yeah.
That's no longer the case.
No.
You can no longer get floods, tens of millions of people to move to the West now voluntarily of their own volition. Them days are kind of gone. The only way that they can get people to move to Western countries now in high numbers, the sort of high numbers that certain people of certain dispositions would celebrate, is through basically bombing them out of their home countries and dispersing them that way, or incentivising them to come to the countries like Ireland with promises of free houses and free this, free that, and free the other, and the poor bastards wind up living in a hotel room for the next 2 years. Like, it's very interesting to listen to interviews that people have done with the residents of the iPass centres. Like, they were promised the sun, moon and stars. That's why they're there. They didn't think they were going to be living in a box room.
No. And I think they're going to get angrier because the promises that they were told they're going to, like things they're told they're going to get, they're not getting them now. And so this is this is another episode to even talk. There's so many you could talk about, so much issues you could talk about. There's a certain thing about migration. Things like they got promised things. Now they're not getting them, so they get angrier. The natives get angrier because we're going into a recession and inflation and everything like that. So they're going to get angrier. Unfortunately, we're going to have people who just get angry at the migrants rather than actually the people who do it.
Yeah,
so there's going to be a huge amount of bitterness.
Yeah.
And
Well, that's the balkanization thing.
yeah.
That's what it is. Yeah. And you would wonder if at this stage they're doing it deliberately, where instead of dividing and conquering two separate tribes overseas, the idea now that the age of, say, territorial empires are over, the idea now is to import different incongruent cultures from all around the world into Western countries, knowing full well that they will never develop homogeny or cohesion, and using them as divided tribes against one another. Because that unfortunately will happen. That's why I wouldn't get overly excited when I see people, say, protesting outside IPAS centres and hurling abuse at the migrants themselves, because that's not the root of the problem. The root of the problem isn't the carrot, it's who's dangling the carrot.
And we, as I said, we have Irish people who say own that building of an IPAS, right, or say they own a hotel.
Yeah.
They're profiting off
Yeah.
this.
I've
And
seen an article,
then they're living, they say go to Marbella,
Yeah.
they go off, and they're watching the money coming in, and I don't understand how a person can do that. How a person can sell
Well,
the
we're
country.
back to values and priorities again.
Yeah.
Character development, or the lack thereof. If you've learnt that your biggest priorities in life is to feather your own nest and earn your own few bob and fuck anybody else, that's what that looks like in behavioural expression. Selling your country out, not caring for the consequences. Once you're able to go off to Mallorca or Tenerife or the Costa del Sol or wherever it is you go and enjoy the fruits of it, that's all you care about. But you're leaving nothing for anybody else.
Yeah, and it's just, and then people don't understand that, like, when you do the IPAS thing, it knocks out tourism. So there's a sector in Ireland being knocked out, and then there's consequences of that. But it's literally like, yes, I actually think a lot of the things are deliberate. I actually believe they are completely deliberate in what they're doing. Maybe it's because I've been awake for a period of time and I've investigated into it. But just looking from this point of view, when they do, say for instance, they say bring on the IPAS, or they bring in, for instance, into hotels, you're killing a tourism of a country. That's thousands of jobs. Now, I've always said this, and we'll go to this another time when we talk about the economy and things like that. We'll actually have a few guests maybe on that as well. Is the pub and restaurant business. They are in huge trouble.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to get an inside
We will.
perspective on that, because like they've been squeezed for a long time between insurance and liability and this, that and the other. I don't know, I've only heard anecdotal evidence about that, but I do know that they have been squeezed for a long time.
And there's many industries, and this is what I'm saying, over the coming weeks and months, the people who we interview in them sectors will get more of a grasp of it. And then we can put all that stuff together, so if people are listening, or even for ourselves, if no one's listening, we can learn about each section and what state it's in from people who are in it. And we can put that together and say, well, actually, for example, what's the horse racing industry like? Remember, we met a guy over in the Curra Racecourse, and that trainer was saying he was struggling. He only had
not getting paid.
Not getting paid.
You would think the Hershey people have money and would be honourable, but no, this doesn't seem to be the case.
There's probably industries we think are actually okay that aren't.
Yeah.
And it'll come out. And that'll be interesting over the next couple of weeks to find out these things, because we need to start talking about what's going on. Okay, I get for the first 12 minutes on television, it's Palestine, it's Ukraine, it's Europe. All they see is that European flag, which I hate. Okay, we see that. But we need to go and talk to people who are in our own country. We're a small country. We need to talk about what's going on in our own country, so we can get more of a grasp of each industry or what certain people are thinking, because we're going to learn a lot. Like the guests we're going to be having on, we're going to learn a lot of them, their own journey of waking up to it, what their perspective, how they see it. Because for me, this is the only game in town. You have your Netflix, your sports, your GA, your pints. That is irrelevant. We are the most, in my opinion, we're at the most important time of human history, and we need to have these conversations. They're not easy, especially for people who are waking up, but we got to have them, because we got to think, we got to put our children and our country's future ahead of our own likes and our own pleasures.
Entertainment, yeah. Well, that was a core idea of Too Real, and a lot to do with the name Too Real. for the podcast was that we wouldn't be focusing exclusively on our own bias. The whole idea with this is that we bring in two perspectives. We see things, as much as we can at least, from two different perspectives.
Yeah.
And through the tension and the resolution, and at times even the friction of those two opposite perspectives, we should see something closer to the truth. So even though me and you, we wouldn't be described as left-wingers,
No.
we can at least still stop and ask, right, well, what motivates somebody to advocate for, say, for example, a 70% rate of tax
Yeah.
on this? They call it the rich and imply that it'll be billionaire, but some poor bastard who's probably just has the temerity to earn a little bit over the average, like what's the top tier? Last time I checked anyway, it was 50% if you earn over 30-something thousand euro or something like that. So you have to think what motivates that kind of mentality.
Mm-hmm.
So even though that might not align with our values as such, not really, we can at least be curious to find out what values they have and what they believe that those policies and those behaviours will do for them, what benefits are offered.
100%, and I know people might think this won't happen, but I'm hoping it does.
Mm.
I wouldn't mind interviewing somebody who has a completely different outlook and
what's the reasonable about?
What's the reason about? But
someone's going to fly off the handle and go balloon, so forget about it.
I understand that, but one thing you have to learn over this period of time, because we've been lucky, we've been awake for a while, so we've had to deal with different emotions and learning more about ourselves and how to deal with it. Like what we said earlier on, this is fifth generation warfare. There's not bullets, but there's a whole lot of stuff coming at us. Every day, as you said, it's not just one thing now. It's 5 things a day are coming from all different parts, which affect the country and affect our lives and the future. So we have to kind of become better at dealing with it. And that means more conversations like this. And to be honest with you, as I've been told a lot in my life as well, I need to listen to it. But you've 2 ears and 1 mouth. We need to listen more to all aspects. And we mightn't agree with it, but we need to listen to it.
Yeah, especially if you want to discover the truth. Because that's, earlier on you mentioned how a lot of people in what's called the old scene here in Ireland, they go to an event where they meet other people and then they hear a perspective that's a little bit different from their own, and then straight away they just fall apart. That's basically their view of the world hardening so much that it actually gets brittle.
Yeah.
In other words, there's an imbalance. A little bit of doubt is actually good. Now too much doubt obviously is bad.
Yeah.
But if you believe a certain thing, whatever it happens to be, and there's examples of that, being able to process counter-examples is equally as beneficial to your perspective.
Yeah.
Because granted, it might not be what you exactly want to see in that situation, but it has value. There's things you can learn from that, as opposed to where if you develop a belief system whereby you just want to see your perspective and your perspective alone, as soon as you see something else, then you just fall apart straight away.
It's definitely one thing I've learned about myself in the last couple of years, is that I'm very open-minded, and I actually love that, because
well, if you're motivated by a desire to actually figure things out, then that's a quality that you have to have.
Yeah.
Because you won't be able to figure it out otherwise. It'll all be confusing otherwise, and it can be convoluted enough looking at what's going on in the world today without focusing exclusively on the elements that are most salient or most relevant to you and omitting all the rest.
Yeah.
You'll never figure it out if you do that. Yeah.
And I've always said it, like a huge thing in Ireland and the world, I suppose, but a huge thing that we all need to look at is the ego, because the ego is a huge obstacle, in my opinion, for people to open their mind, because the ego has kind of made them, no, I can't look at that. It is steeped in us. And I had it. I definitely had it. Everyone has it to a degree. But we need to really work on that, because if you have an ego of, say, I'm doing up this podcast and I want to, and I'm famous, that shouldn't be your motivation.
No.
That shouldn't be. It should be that we're actually, the long goal is to get more people talking.
Well, a big ego, ironically, can be actually a symptom of low self-esteem. The reason being is that your ego can be and usually is made up of a lot of the defense mechanisms. that I alluded to earlier. Now I won't go into that now because I'm reaching the end here now. But basically, the more of an inflated or deflated perception of something that you have, the more of a disparity between the objective reality and what the mind is perceiving. The more of a disparity there is, that disparity has to be bridged somehow or another.
Yeah.
The mind still has to make sense of it. So it develops all of these various projections and identifications and rationalizations, and on it goes, to bridge the gap between what it understands, what it wants to see, and what's actually happening. And that would have a lot to do with, big egos that actually turn out to be very fragile.
Yeah.
And become easily triggered.
Yeah.
In basic terms, it's basically an imbalance of perception. And that's the value again with the idea with this podcast. Even though we might and undoubtedly do have our own slants and our own perspectives and our own value systems, there's always value in seeing something from somebody else's point of view, even if you disagree for no other reason than it pulls the perception into balance again. 100%. And it dissolves an awful lot of those defense mechanisms and the fragile ego that's built off them.
100%. And Mick, I think, as I said with the ego thing, it's the same thing as it's okay to be wrong. I've been wrong a lot of my life about certain things, but I've been right about certain things. But it's refreshing to say, geez, I was wrong about that.
Yeah.
This changed my perspective, or that I didn't know that information. But I'm open-minded. And it's okay to have a certain belief, as long as you don't let it consume you of actual facts of what's going on.
Yeah. Now, there can be an imbalanced perception in the opposite direction, where you have too much doubt. An awful lot of, say, conservative thinkers would be like that. They nearly have too much doubt. They don't have enough certainty in their position. Because of that, it's very easy to demoralize them and undermine them. So it's about integration is the word.
Yeah.
Where you basically transcend the two perspectives and realize that there's value in both. You can still select where you want to fall within that perception, but you're at least aware of them. You can integrate them.
Yeah.
It's an holistic view of an holistic worldview. That's what it is, and that's why people are triggered. That's why, and we all do, by the way. I'm not saying that it's some kind of illness or something like that, but when it gets out of control, that's when you get that thing where you've inverted commas awake people going to these events and all that, hearing something they don't like, and then flying off the handle, accusing everybody of being trolls and all this nonsense. That's where that comes from.
Yeah. What's the one there? It's a psyop, which is fine with them ones, but it's like he's a shill.
Yeah, that's the other one.
It's in my opinion, it's just made me. I always said at the start that why didn't we get everybody, even if they didn't have the same views? I'm talking about people maybe who had big podcasts in the Irish alt scene, join together and say, put up on the wall three core values like Ireland, the future, whatever it may be. But there was a spider web of other things that people believed in, like some people say, I believe the earth is flat, and then they're off it. So like we can't do that anymore. And over the next couple of weeks, months, we're going to be interviewing people and getting their perspective on Ireland, what their awakening was like, and just to hear different views. And that's all we want, because if you're driving along, I know some people and they might be awake and it could be isolating for them. And they might have a driving job, or because I know a lot of people, I can't listen to the radio anymore. I don't do any mainstream, so I can't listen to it. And some people just like a podcast that they might, it's like they're in the room with us, and that's what we kind of want to get. So just in next week, we have a good guest next week.
Yeah, good old lineup. Yeah, that's for sure.
It's Tom MacDonald from Newbridge. He's a councillor, a huge person in the field protest. So we'll get learn more about Tom himself, his family, his journey, because we're all on a journey, and we'll learn about his journey and, for instance, what he thought of the field protest, what's he think of it now since it's happened, because he's been in the thick of it. Like I wasn't in the thick of it, I was observing, but I wasn't in the thick of it. He was, and he's a good, honest man. So I'm delighted to say we have him for next week.
Yeah. Yeah, but that's our intention, and that's what we've lined up. Interesting topics, good guests,
and
we'll start figuring things out around here.
Exactly, and we'll just to open the conversation.
Yeah.
What we'll do is we'll post these up on the social media websites. The likes of
anyone who's interested. Yeah,
in the likes of Instagram and these things. So, Mick, thanks for coming in, and we'll be in touch with everybody with our next podcast, which will be next week.
Yep, sounds like a plan.
Okay,
it's a wrap.